Hello, everyone, and welcome to the January edition of Stay Connected with the Worcester Senior Center. I'm your guest host, Dr. Michael Hirsch, Medical Director for the Division of Public Health. And wow, it's 2025. Amazing how time flies. It seemed like 2024 went like a blink. Sometimes it was a little on the slow side, though, too. But now here we are. And this is going to be a very momentous year for public health, for politics. And the one constant that I'm kind of grasping on very, very tightly is that family and friends still matter the most. There's a lot of stuff that's coming down the pike that I don't know where it's going to leave public health. I don't know where it's going to leave medicine in general. We're kind of in a rough patch. People have made a hero out of someone who murdered a chief of a healthcare insurance company. That's, I think, just a disgraceful thing to lionize somebody who's a murderer. I know people are frustrated with insurance companies. I know people are frustrated with the medical system. But I think we can't blow it up unless we have an alternative. And certainly shooting the leaders of the organizations is not the answer. We have a president who is coming in, who has nominated for key healthcare positions very, very marginal people with strange ideas. R.F. Kennedy Jr. and his stance on vaccinations and raw food. Mehmet Oz, who I knew as a medical student at Columbia when I was a resident, and he basically became a glorified supplement vitamin pusher on his shows, and I don't think really knows how to run an agency as big as Medicare and Medicaid. The Surgeon General, Sean Mallory, he seems like a decent person, and he's a skilled surgeon, but he also believes in some very unusual homeopathic remedies to common medical problems that I think don't really go along with current scientific knowledge. And we're going to be in for a rough patch. I think once you start making people doubt that vaccines are safe, and once you start making accusations about healthcare organizations price gouging, I think it really instills a lot of enmity, anger against these organizations, and people will resist our recommendations. And all this is happening while this bird flu issue is still percolating out, mostly in the West, but it's a very scary thing. They just found a variant of the avian flu in a cow there in California that has the biggest potential of human transmission. We haven't seen human transmission except in 5 cases, and in all 5 cases these were livestock workers on these big factory farms, and they may have gotten their disease from drinking raw milk. So this is one of the causes of RFK Jr. He wants us to be able to drink raw milk or unprocessed cheese or things that are not going through the pasteurization process. Louis Pasteur came up with this pasteurization process in the 1870s, and it's estimated it saved millions of lives because TB was transmitted through raw milk products before pasteurization became possible. So to walk this back and just say, It is what it is. It's an individual choice to drink raw milk. No, not if you get tuberculosis. You get tuberculosis, you can infect your family, you can infect your school, you can infect your workplace. This is something that we have learned the hard way during the pandemic, that your individual health choices in 2025 are not your own. You make a choice that would potentially lead to getting a polio or measles outbreak because you didn't get vaccinated, and it's going to affect thousands of people around you. And we unfortunately can't accept that. Now, I know some of you are the same age as me, maybe a little bit older at the senior center. Do you remember the mid-1950s? Do you remember that every summer, if you had a child with a fever, that the parents were so worried that this was going to turn into polio, and it would leave your child paralyzed, stuck in an iron lung, and potentially dead? So when Jonas Salk in 1954 in Pittsburgh, and he did all this experimentation right near where I lived in Pittsburgh for 10 years in the 90s, came up with his vaccination. People lined up around the block in every city in America trying to get this vaccine. And have we gone from that clamor for protection to now this feeling like, do your own research and you can decide? That's not how public health works. Public health works by trying to do the greatest good for the greatest number, and vaccination is a tried and true way of beating down these diseases. We didn't see polio for 30, 40 years now. We haven't seen measles in 30, 40 years now because of vaccines. Rubella, the German measles, was found to be terrible for pregnant moms. Their kids would be born with all different kind of birth defects. We haven't seen that in a long time, at least in first world countries. This still happens in some of the remote areas of Africa and remote areas of South America and Asia, but not in the industrialized first world countries. And we should not be walking it back. So that's my Debbie Downer segment of 2025, because I am very worried that also the director of the NIH is a person who doesn't believe in a lot of these premises, so that research money will not be well funded in these areas. Similarly, the CDC, which finally, after almost a 30-year boycott by the Republican Congress, got some money to start doing research into gun violence prevention. That may all go away. And we really need to try to figure out how to be a loyal opposition, to have senators, congressmen who will stand up to some of these appointments to begin with, because the hearings will start after Inauguration Day, and really question what are the tenets that these candidates believe in, what are their qualifications, have they ever had any experience running these mega organizations. And they can't start from a place, these candidates, that negates 50 years of medical progress. I just feel like, as powerful as President-elect Trump is, this is very poorly thought out and ignorant. So I think we have to figure out a way of fighting it. Meanwhile, supposedly the states will still have their own sets of priorities, and unless they're doing something that is totally unconstitutional, I don't think that President Trump will interfere. And we have a very progressive state. Our Massachusetts Department of Public Health is very progressive, and I think so too is our Department of Health and Human Services. And we will have to compensate for some of the stuff going on in Washington. And I think we're prepared to do that. It's a tough road to hoe. You get a lot of negative social media commentary if you go against Mr. Trump and his team, whatever that's going to look like. But, I would say bring it. We are ready to fight for what we think is proven by science to be right. Okay. Boy, I started out on a rant. I didn't really want to start out on a rant because as we're filming this, it's just about Christmas time, and I'm in a great mood. I don't know. I just find that this holiday is a wonderful one. Now, I'm a nice Jewish boy from the Bronx. I have no right celebrating Christmas, but I'm married to a nice Catholic girl, and we've always celebrated both Hanukkah and Christmas, and our kids were raised with kind of both traditions. And I love the whole decorations and the Christmas tree and the gathering. I mean, how can you be against a holiday that welcomes peace on earth? So I shouldn't be in a bad mood. I'm really not in a bad mood. I just am apprehensive about January. Well, let's talk about January. January is a month that was named after the Greek god Janus. Janus was a Greek god, a Roman god too, who had two faces, one looking backward and one looking forward. So this was a month that's supposed to be a reflection on where you've come from, what you accomplished in the year before, and what you see coming towards you, what you want to accomplish for the next year. I think it's a very neat concept. It wasn't originally the first month of the year. March was the first month of the year. But it was inserted in there by one of the Roman emperors because of this concept of self-reflection. And it has, as a stone, if you're interested in someone who's born in January, you're supposed to get them a garnet, which is part of an element called hematite, which was very prevalent in the collision of tectonic plates in the what's called the Laurentian landmass, which is what we originally were 300 million years ago. So there's a lot of hematite around. Some of those big boulders that you see in the woods or along the roadside, if you crack them open, and it's hard to crack it open, it's very, very dense. In the middle, there might be a little, what we call a geode containing garnet. I wouldn't advise doing that without supervision or permission, but so garnet is the stone, and the flower is a carnation. And the month is generally known as the coldest month of the year in the Northern Hemisphere. So that's interesting because it's National Soup Month, it's National Oatmeal Month, and I think you can get the trend here. I think people get cold and they want to have something warm and delicious. Those two things are pretty cool to eat. And we also see some of the awareness months. This one is about National Alzheimer's Awareness Month. Alzheimer's disease, some of you, I'm sure, have had friends that have suffered from this ailment. It's the kind of progressive loss of your executive faculties until you get to a point where you have significant dementia. There are some very interesting drug trials going on that can potentially slow the process, but thus far we haven't figured out a way of preventing this from happening. There are great things you can do if you recognize it early enough. So that's what a lot of Alzheimer research is about, is trying to identify early signs of this. Now, we all have senior moments. I certainly have senior moments now. The not being able to get the name of somebody that you see all the time, and you're struggling to get the name, or forgetting a birthday, or things like little, forgetful episodes. That doesn't mean you have Alzheimer's. That's just a natural process in human aging. But if you are noticing in your loved one that they get confused easily, or they have staring episodes, or when they're driving they no longer know where they're going, those are the kind of things that are early warning signs. And if you can detect it and then see a medical specialist, there are some medications that can be given that can definitely improve memory and slow the progression of this kind of dementia. And I think it's an important part of the armamentarium for any primary care physician, because our population is aging. The boomers are getting up there, and we are very high users of medical resources. If we can keep the people functional on the outside of medical institutions, so they don't have to be hospitalized, they don't have to be put in memory units and skilled nursing facilities, boy, that would be terrific. So there's no shame involved with this. This is nothing you did wrong to your brain as you got older. But if you have concerns about this for yourself or a loved one, really seek out your primary care doc, and they can in turn either treat it, or if they feel like it's above their head, there are specialists in Alzheimer's. We have a very good group of Alzheimer's specialists in the UMass system, and I would urge you to take advantage of that. As far as dates in this month, of course, New Year's Day is January 1, and you probably have done some revelry the night before, New Year's Eve in December. New Year's Day is kind of a day to get together. It used to be a very holy day because it was the commemoration of the circumcision of Christ. But now it's kind of lost its religious importance, and it's usually just a day to kind of recover from New Year's Eve and maybe get together and watch some football, or just celebrate with your family. So that's probably the first day that I would point to. January 20th this year is really packed because, on a minor note, it's National Cheese Day. I'm a huge fan of cheese, and I think it's very healthy. Again, provided it's not raw cheese. It has to be processed properly. But no, we have Inauguration Day and Martin Luther King Day on the same day. Inauguration Day this year will be fraught with, I think, a lot of members of Congress and others boycotting it because of the anger they feel about our president-elect. But Martin Luther King Day is a day that we really recognize a wonderful person who tried their very best in their lifetime to end racial injustice in this country and to promote civil rights. And what I loved about his words growing up, I was 14 when he was killed, was how he was one of those rising tide lifts all boats. He said, an injustice here is an injustice everywhere. And that really resonates with me. It's judging somebody by the content of their character and not the color of their skin is another quote that always sticks with me. I think that his vision of racial justice and equity was just treating everybody like you want to be treated yourself. It's a golden rule thing. And I think some of his words have been held up and are being embraced, but others think that he didn't go far enough, that he didn't try to give special attention to the plight of the African American. And I don't interpret it that way, but I think it's great that we recognize him, Nobel Prize winner, and somebody that really made a difference in his lifetime to try to bring us all together. There's a very wonderful ceremony in his honor at the Quinsigamond College here in Worcester, a breakfast that morning that is so uplifting. I've gone to several of them, and the hymns and the beautiful speeches that are made all make you feel like we do have a future in this country, and that we can continue to grow together to make things equitable and safe. So that's a big day, January 20th. January 25th is the last day of the Battle of the Bulge. This is the 80th anniversary of the end of the Battle of the Bulge. Now, I think it's worth saying a little bit about that battle. It was the largest land battle in the European theater in World War II. And the casualties were unbelievable. There were somewhere in the range of 800,000 casualties because Hitler threw his whole army at the Allies, who were kind of trying to just rest up for the winter after they had successfully invaded the continent at Normandy in June of that year and pushed their way all the way to the German border. Hitler tried to smash through the thinned out United States lines in Luxembourg and Belgium and drive his way right up to the port of Antwerp in Belgium. He thought that would split the British and the American forces, and then perhaps the Americans would agree to a peace agreement, and they would all join forces together with the Nazi army to fight off the Russians who were coming from the east. And it looked like his plan might work. He surprised everyone, busted through the American lines, and caused a huge bulge in the lines where his furthest advance was. That's why it was called the Battle of the Bulge. But fortunately, Eisenhower was able to mobilize his forces, particularly the use of General Patton's Third Army, to pivot and rescue an encircled town in Belgium called Bastogne, which I had the privilege of visiting a few years ago. And it's a tiny little town. It's only got about 8,000 inhabitants, but it was a vital crossroads where 11 different roads kind of came together. And capturing it was something that the Germans wanted so that they could drive their motorized columns of army up different directions to defeat the Allies. But the town held out for almost 12 days. And finally, Patton was able to relieve the besieged 101st Airborne in the town the day after Christmas of 1944, 80 years ago. But the battle raged on through January until January 25th. And in that time, the German army was smashed, and it could never mount a offensive attack again. And it was only 5 months later that they declared that they were surrendering, and Hitler, of course, killed himself in his bunker in Berlin. So I think that's a very important date. I'm a military history buff, as I think you follow this program, you know. While this battle was raging, not that far away, my parents were in a concentration camp in Holland, and they knew something was up because all of these German panzer units that had gone to Holland to kind of lick their wounds after they had gotten kicked out of France were mobilizing to try to help the advancing German columns coming through from Germany. So there was a lot of buzz in the camp that maybe liberation would be happening. So it's a very personal thing because my mom at the time, in that month of January, which was the coldest month of the 20th century, was averaging minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit throughout that month. So you can imagine what these poor GIs in the American Army in foxholes were experiencing. If they could still fire their weapon and they would stay in these foxholes for days at a time, they'd come out with frostbite on their feet, or trench foot as it was called, and many of them sustained amputations and gruesome conditions there. No hot meals, no showers, no way stations or rest stations. There was a military hospital in Bastogne that took care of the wounded and the injured and those that were suffering from frostbite, but it was destroyed by German artillery on Christmas Day of 1944. So, speaking of liberation, another important day, January 27th, was the day that the British soldiers liberated Auschwitz, which was the most notorious of all of the Nazi death camps. Approximately 1.1 million out of the 6 million people that were killed in Europe went through that camp. And even more tragically, Anne Frank, whose diary was later discovered and published and has become such a must-read for children and all people who can read. Anne Frank died of typhus probably about a week before that. So there is an International Holocaust Remembrance Day on January 27th, and many of the local synagogues in Central Mass and Eastern Mass have special evening remembrances about that. The thing that resonates so much with me is that we have these policies in place potentially that will authorize people that are undocumented immigrants to be crowded into what you can call concentration camps. And like my parents were separated from their parents, children will be separated as well. And there's all different kind of proposals that, the 14th Amendment, which says if you were born in the boundaries of the United States, you're automatically an American citizen. They want to undo that. That's not constitutional. And you can't just say you're going to undo it. You have to actually pass a constitutional amendment that would undo the 14th Amendment. And I don't think that's going to happen. And B, if there's an attempt to do it, I'm hoping that the Supreme Court, which has been such a strict constructionist court, that also has backed up very, very strict interpretations of the Second Amendment about gun ownership, and the First Amendment about, even corporations have the right to free speech. I hope that they have the backbone to say, we're not changing the Constitution over this immigration policy. Worcester is a sanctuary city. There's all different kind of talk that once in office again, President Trump is going to try to limit the federal aid that goes to sanctuary cities. So again, this is a very dark time. We don't know exactly how much of the bluster of the election rhetoric is going to translate into actual policy. So what can we do? As a community, we have to stand strong together. We have to link up and say, not in my town. We are the second largest city in New England. We have welcomed immigrants from all over the world, of a very large population of Southeast Asians and West Africans, and also Europeans as well, Ethiopians and some North Africans. And what has that led to? It's led to a lot of essential workers joining the workforce. It's led to some wonderful cuisine options where you can either buy groceries from those kind of countries or eat at a restaurant which features an unusual cuisine that you never tried before. We gained so much from immigration. My parents were immigrants. They came over in 1946 and 1948, and I wouldn't be here if that wasn't the case. And I think that the melting pot concept of the United States is such that we deserve to continue that tradition because it has benefited us so much. We have had some wonderful immigrants, from Albert Einstein to Enrico Fermi, Wernher von Braun. Some of the scientific advances that we've made are amazing. At UMass just a few weeks ago, Victor Ambrose, one of our scientist leaders in the Graduate School of Biologic Sciences, won the Nobel Prize, and his family escaped from Hungary during the war. And if they hadn't, we wouldn't have the discoveries that he's made in genetics, which have changed the map of genetic study. So there's so many examples of the advantages of immigration. And yes, I think that it's wrong if people are standing in line in a proper way, trying to get either asylum or legitimate immigration, and somebody jumps the line illegally. But you also have to factor in the fact that they're coming from countries where if they stayed in those countries, they would be killed or raped or put through human trafficking to become prostitutes and drug addicts. If you're desperate, you're desperate. And the people that have migrated across the Rio Grande and across some of the other border states, many of them had really no alternative other than to do that or risk terrible situations back where they came from. So January is going to be a very interesting month. We're going to have to just do like the god Janus. We have to look back at what we have been as a country, what we should be proud of as a country, and then look forward and say, what do we want to continue as a country? Want to do away with vaccinations? Want to do away with Martin Luther King's advice? Want to do away with all immigration and separate families and put them in transit camps and kind of mimic the Nazi forefathers? I say no, but apparently the country, by a plurality, not a majority, voted for a president who is in favor of those things. And I hear a lot that it was because inflation is too high, grocery bills are too high, gas is too expensive. But the first thing that came out towards the end of December was that President-elect Trump said it's going to be very hard to get the grocery prices down. So now we're going to start seeing, walking back, a lot of the bluster of last year, and we're going to have to see how things move forward. But I am an eternal optimist, even though I sound like a Debbie Downer today. And my feeling is that we as a country are better than some of the things that have been touted by President-elect Trump. I don't think that we're going to accept policies, programs that hurt our neighbors, hurt our future, change the way we educate kids, change the way we do public health. And I'm counting on that. I may be too optimistic there, but I think it's going to be a battle of wills. And here, at least in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and particularly in central Massachusetts, we have some very wise folk in different offices of responsibility that I think are going to protect our individual rights and those of our neighbors. So with that, I'm going to say thanks for listening. I hope this wasn't too dark, because I do feel like moving forward, we have a lot to be thankful for, and we just have to be vigilant that we don't take too many steps backward. I don't think we will. So I'll see you next month, and I hope that you have a good January and be well.